because I know that there are people that came just today. So, okay, a quick recap of what we said until now. Now, what we have seen is that we have learned to see letters through the lens of the so-called stroke of the pen or brush, and that it was exactly the stroke that gave us what we called the contrast. So, we have this concept of contrast that is probably the main thing that give to letters their shape. Okay, so we have seen that by hypothesizing the flat brush, this writing tool can leave in this direction a thick trace, and in this other direction a thin trace. And it is exactly the difference between thin and thick shapes that what we call contrast, and what is for us the most important thing about the actual shape of letter, besides their so-called skeleton. The skeleton of a letter is just this trace that is in the middle of our letter, of the strokes of our letter, but we have to apply to this to the skeleton a certain weight to form a letter. So in some way, the skeleton is the central line that sometimes just mean it just means the trace of the movement of the end while writing. Okay. Now, the other thing that derives from this is that depending on the angle, the so-called writing angle, so if this is the baseline, the writing angle is this angle here, that the writing tool, the pen, create with the baseline. Okay? The term writing angle is normally used by paleographer, people that study old writing, because it it is useful to describe the writing that they study. So, why is that so important for us in the context of what we have said? Because depending on the writing angle, you can have very different effect. Okay, so if we assume a small writing angle, meaning that the pen is held, for example, with this angle here, with the baseline, we have this situation here where this is the thickest line, this is the thinnest line, and vertical lines here have a certain weight, usually thick in this case, and horizontal lines are usually relatively thin. Okay? So with a small writing angle, you obtain more or less our normal capitals. Where you can see that vertical strokes are thicker than horizontal strokes. This can be particularly evident when you have a letter like H that has two vertical strokes and one horizontal stroke. So let's see. This one is our letter that are achieved with a small writing angle. But what happens if we, instead of a small writing angle, we use a steeper writing angle? So let's reorganize this one. Okay, let's assume a steeper angle. Let's say this is the baseline and this is the pen or the brush. Okay. So in this case, your pen is held at a very steep angle, so it is more like I don't know, it's like turning your hand. In this situation, you have horizontal lines that are thick and vertical lines that are thin. What happens if we apply mechanically this writing angle to H? In this case, our H will look like this. So we can see that there is contrast in both these letters. But this contrast is reversed. In one case, you have thin verticals and thick horizontals, and in this case, you have thin verticals. In this case, you have thick verticals. In this case, you have thick horizontals. In this case, you have thin horizontals, okay? So a very different effect, objectively, is achieved just by moving the pen, or just by assuming in your head that what you are drawing is produced by a pen that is held at a steeper angle. Okay, this is just a derivation a logical and material derivation of our hypothesis of a pen that writes at a certain angle and leave a trace that on one direction is seen and in the orthogonal direction is thick. Now let's see what happened actually in the history of Latin writing. Okay. Unfortunately, the image is not very clear. By the way, until now, we have seen the so-called epigraphic writing. Epigraphic writing, I say this again, is writing on durable material such as stone, and is particularly fit for public writing, official writing, writing that you see on public buildings, temples, and so on and so on. So it is a very official writing that has all the characteristics that we spoke about. But what about the other kind of writing? And I mean the other uses of writing. While Roman societies grew bigger and complex, different uses for writing came into being. And at a certain point, the Latin culture developed a literature of its own. So, a book production trade developed because people had to read books of poetry, of history, of literature in general, or technical books. Books were then very different from the books of today. They were mainly written, they were mainly produced in the form of scrolls. A scroll is a continuous piece of paper, but they didn't use paper. They used material such as papyrus, like the Egyptian, because they didn't know how to do paper. We introduced paper in Europe, importing the techniques in the Middle Ages, importing it from China. By the way, at that time, during the Roman Empire, they still wrote on papyrus or parchment and other material. The scroll is just a roll of paper, or in this case papyrus, that can be read by scrolling this continuous paper or papyrus. Okay. Now, apart from this, books were produced obviously in rather small format. So writing should be obviously different from writing on stone. First of all, the material used to write on was, as I said, papyrus or parchment or even fabric, but in general, it was a flexible and not very durable material. The other thing is that on stone, you use a brush, as we have seen, and then you carve the stone. On paper or papyrus or inflexible material, you have to use another instrument, another tool. And it was the so-called calamus. Then I will explain this better. By the way, it is in English, the translation is reed pen. Now, with this pen that is similar to, in the effect, to the brush, they wrote with this kind of writing. This is called the rustic capital, but today we prefer to use book capital as a term. Book capitals is this writing that was mainly used for producing books. So there was a kind of specialization of writing styles. The inscriptional and epigraphic capitals, the book capitals. Then we will see if, or if you read about paleography and the history of Latin writing, you can learn about different writing styles than these two. By the way, let's see what happens in this page. I know it is not very understandable because the image shows also the other part of the page. By the way, this is a contrasted image. What can we see here? First of all, the structure of this writing, I mean the skeleton, okay, it is the same. No? You can see here an N. You can see the shape of O. It is the same. You can see the shape of A up there. And for the important bits that I've mentioned, the two-line system, we recognize here a strong alignment in this two-line system. So this writing retains the same features of inscriptional and epigraphic capitals. The two-line system, letters are detached. They do not fuse together. The structure of writing is vertical, and it is aligned on horizontal lines. Basically, it is the same, but the actual visual effect is quite different. Okay. So how to explain this difference? The main difference here derives from the writing angle that I spoke before about. If you carefully look at this letter, you can recognize this difference, and you can also recognize the actual writing angle for this writing. In fact, look at the letter E. Here. Despite the quality, the bad quality of the image, you can see that the vertical line of E and I, etc., are really thin compared to horizontal lines. So this is a clear and signal that these letters were written with a steeper writing angle, such as, such as this one here, okay? So let's see if we can give an explanation for these shapes. A simple explanation. Okay. We are talking about book capitals. In Latin, these are called capitalis. Libraria, I think. We have our skeleton for letter E. Okay. This is the skeleton. It doesn't say too much. But if you combine this with a steeper writing angle, meaning the pen is held like this, okay? This is the pen, by the way, okay? And if you use the pen in this direction, this is the writing angle. Okay, now, if you combine the skeleton with this writing angle, you obtain exactly this situation. Okay, so you obtain the capitalis libraria, or book capitals, that is just the same structure with different writing angle. Obviously, this is not everything about these capital letters. There is also a different taste and other technical and material conditions that explain all the shapes. For example, since the reed pen, we call this reed pen, is made, is different, is more flexible than the pen, metal pens that we use today, and also you have to write at small dimension. In general, this writing style looks more soft than the epigraphic style. So the actual shape of these letters is something that resembles this. Okay, with here, corner are softer than the usual hard corner of the epigraphic capitals. Also, another characteristic is that this writing looks quite compressed. We already used this term, compressed, to mean a writing where letters are, how can I say, pushed by the sides and look more vertical than horizontal. Look at the E, how compressed it is. It's very, very narrow. But also other letters like A is more narrow than the epigraphic capitals. Okay, in epigraphic capitals, an A is made in this way. Here, this is the epigraphic capital A, and in this style, the A look more like this. Without the middle stroke. By the way, what we are interested in this moment is the fact that the proportion of A is almost square in epigraphic capital, and it is a rectangle in the book capital A. So, to summarize the characteristics of this writing style, we can say that same structure. It has the same structure of epigraphic capitals, and it is a capital letter So we have the two-line system. But we also have a different writing angle. And letters are now this style, this kind of letters were very used in the past, until the 5th century after Christ. But at one point they became obsolete. So while the epigraphic capitals still remain the basic structure of our alphabet, at least for the uppercase, without much modifications, these letters simply disappeared from our tradition, and they look a bit strange. They also look a bit strange because we are not used, because of the importance of the other capitals and the more horizontal, more moderate writing angle. We are not used to this difference where horizontal lines are thicker than vertical. Okay? It is a style that resembles other alphabets or other writing systems. For example, both Arab and Hebrew writing systems are traditionally written with a steeper writing angle, and they share with the book capitals this stress over the horizontals. Okay, when horizontal lines looks thicker, bolder than vertical lines. By the way, in our tradition, in Western Latin letters, we don't have this situation, and it looks a bit strange to us. I wanted to talk about this because it shows how writing styles and letters that for centuries were the normal way of writing and reading suddenly disappear and are not used anymore. The other part is that by looking at this, we can understand how the importance of conceptualizing the distribution of contrast and weights inside letters with the idea of the pen and the writing angle of the pen and the contrast that derives from it. And the other concept that is important here is that we see the same structure of letters, but different proportions in terms of horizontal compression. So we still use today, we use today, in the past they didn't use it, but we use today the term compressed. And today is an important term, and horizontal proportion of letters is an important thing because it is one of the main variation axes that designers use today. A normal typeface family is composed by different weights, where the thickness, the boldness of letters change. We have letters that go from thin to or lightweight to bold or black. Okay, but we also have typefaces that go from compressed to extended. Okay, this is a variation that type foundries, type designers use for producing typefaces that can be used in different contexts. There are contexts where you need letters that are more economical in space, so that you can fit more letters inside the same space. Usually, for example, in newspaper, you want a typeface that is readable, so, but at the same time is quite economical in terms of space. You need to optimize your space. So the typefaces used for newspapers are usually a bit compressed. Not too much, because if you design very compressed letter, they are hard to read. In other situations, you may need letters that are stretched, so letters that are extended or expanded, as we see today. So, okay. And then I will show you a modern interpretation of these letters. Then we will close this series of lessons about the model of contrast by showing typefaces made in the recent past. See you in 10 minutes or so. A few years ago, the type designer David Jonathan Ross published a typeface called Rustic. You can find in the board okay, you can find in the board an image and a link. By the way, I'd like to talk about this because it is an example of how a designer can make an interpretation, a contemporary interpretation of an old typeface. So let's see what we can learn and we can observe from this typeface. First of all, it is explicitly based on book capitals that are also called rustic capitals. The capital letters that we have analyzed today. Okay, we say that These capitals basically retain the same structure of epigraphic capitals, but they were written with a steeper writing angle that produced a very different type of contrast. Instead of having strong verticals and weak horizontals, in this case you have strong horizontals and weak verticals. Then we have this proportion that we have called compressed. Okay, so these letters are quite compressed. Okay, if I draw on it, you can see that they can be inscribed inside a rectangle that is quite tall. And what about the other thing, the contrast, where horizontals are stronger than verticals? You can see, you can see here let's take our target letter, that is E. You can see that in this letter, horizontal strokes are bold, very bold, and vertical strokes are thin. Now, in the original letters, you find a softer style. You said before that seen in detail. They are made like this. But the designer freed himself from this literal interpretation and transformed the letters in stronger shapes. So he preferred lines over curves. And then he also, so our E is made like this. But to add more dynamic look at this letter, he also slightly changed he slightly changed the vertical lines, adding a curve here. Okay. And then he used this same structure for other letters like R. Etc. etc. Now, this is the normal. This highlights the normal procedure that we use when, in general, not always, but in general, it is true that we use when we design letters for a typeface. Once you have described and once you have chosen some of the main shapes that you are using, you reuse the same shapes again and again. So, for example, in this case, you have that horizontal strokes are rendered in this way. Okay, so the same shape can be repeated in different places. Something that repeats over and over again is the serif. Okay. So in designing, you define shapes. So this is the serif that join the vertical stroke in this way. And this can be conceived as a building block. Okay? When you design, you define building blocks that can be used over and over again in your letters. Clearly, you cannot always use the same exact shapes, but you have to change them according to their position. So change this shape a little bit. The other building block is clearly the vertical stroke. So a vertical stroke can be just a rectangle like this. Okay? But usually this can be boring and very static. So sometimes adding a little flare like this can add interest to and movement to your letters. Okay. There is also a lot of work of interpretation here, and also of invention. Another thing that is completely, no, not completely unrelated. It is related, but it is at the same time, in some way, the opposite side of the coin in regarding the strokes are the counters. Okay, we define the counters or counter shapes or counter form as the empty parts inside the filled shape. Okay. The counter of U in this case is this one. Let's use another color. Okay, this is the counter of U. This is the counter of R. You can have both open counters like this one, or you can have to me, in this typeface, the designer worked on purpose on the balance between empty shapes, the counters, and filled shapes, the letters, what we see about the letters. So take a look again at R. You can, I don't know how to express this, but you can see that there is a certain balance between the empty part and the filled part, because the empty part, the counter, can be seen as a shape in itself. Okay, you can take the counter of R you can take the counter of R and as a shape in itself. It is a good shape. It is. It can be what the designer has actually designed. The same can be seen in O, where he decided to design the counter in this way, like a drop. And again, this is also true for you, where you have this shape. Okay. It is a bit like certain figures that are called bistable, that can be seen in one way or another, depending on whether you see one part as the background or the foreground. Okay? There is a designer that works on in Illustrator, then works on this concept. It is called Noma Bar. Here, for example, you can, it is not the best thing that he has designed, but in this example, you can see the dog and the cat that share the same eye. At the same time, the shapes of the cat inside can be read as a part of the dog. But if you focus on the cat, the dog becomes the background. Or this one is better for me. Here, you can see the flame and the match, or a person with the hood. Okay, so depending on whether you read one part as the background or the foreground, you have two different images. Okay, this is the classical phase illusion. In this, you can see a vase, the black shape, or two heads. Now, you cannot see both at the same time because you can only see the background or the foreground. So your perception should decide if the black is the background or it is the foreground. Now, in some way, letters can be read in the same way, as a balance between a foreground and a background. So sometimes it's useful to look at counter that are normally seen as what it is left after you have traced your letter as shapes in themselves. Okay? So sometimes they can be designed, and you can shift your focus as designer toward the shape of the counter instead of only looking at the black part, the filled part of the letter. Keep in mind this idea because for me, it is a good exercise to try to focus on counters instead of instead of strokes, to design interesting or more interesting letters. Okay. Now, let's make a review of this concept of strokes that I have. Okay. This idea of talking about letters in terms of strokes is not new. Basically, is what paleographer always do and always have done, treating letters as the product of a tracing tool that has certain features, like the pen. Now, there is also this book. Oh, there is out of focus. Let's see if I can. Okay, the stroke. You can find in the Google Classroom feed, in the bibliography, okay, this one, the stroke. The author of this, Norzi, I don't know how it is pronounced, it is a Dutch man, was a calligrapher, designer, and teacher of typography. Now, he left a durable trace in type design because of his teaching. And you can see this approach, the approach described by Norzi, in the product of a lot of type designers that were formed in the context of the Den Haag Academy of Fine Arts, where there is a master in type design called Type and Media. By the way, the approach described by Norzi is more or less what I've told you in these lessons. That is, he see every typographic letter as the imitation of written letter. Written letters in terms of written by hand, okay? So calligraphy, in some way, it is the base of every typographic shape. The book is written in a quite dogmatic way, and this is probably the worst part of the book. Moreover, this idea that all shapes in Latin typography derive from the pen and the shape of the pen and handwriting, basically, is not very solid. No, it is not something that can be sustained as it does, because you cannot see certain shapes that exist in Latin typography as the sole product of the imitation of handwriting. Now, for the conceptual part of this book that I suggest you to read, he classifies strokes in two ways. Okay. What we have seen until now sorry, but I have to switch off and on. Okay. What we have seen until now, it is this idea of a tracing tool that can be the pen or the brush. I will use the shape of a reed pen. Okay, that leave a trace that change in width depending on the direction. Okay. By the way, let's see what a reed pen looks like. Okay, this is a reed pen. You can make it with bamboo, but obviously in the at the times of the Roman Empire, they didn't have bamboo. They had the plant that is called reed. It is more flexible than bamboo. By the way, okay, you can see how it is cut. And you can see the front of the pen, the part that actually write, that is thick. And the cut is made in such a way that it looks like a bit like a scalpel or chisel. So it is really thin in the other direction. But you can cut the pen like you want. Okay, so no, okay. We have seen this model. He generalized this model saying that this contrast, this type of contrast, he called this type of contrast contrasts by translation. Translation here means the fact that if you translate, okay, let's assume this is a trace. If you translate, if you move, simply move without rotating this trace along a line, what you have is a trace like this one, okay, that shows a contrast. In certain parts, for example, here is quite thick. Here, as we have seen, as we have saw, it is thin, and then it is thick again. Okay. Now here the contrast is the product of translating, that is moving without rotating, a shape segment along a line. Okay, that is in geometrical terms the same thing that we have saw that we saw when we talked about the process of tracing Roman capitals with the brush. Okay, so translation here is they used in the same way mathematicians use. That is moving without rotation, movement without rotation. You move this linear shape, this segment that is the front of the pen, without rotating, and obviously what you have is exactly what we see in traditional calligraphy, Western calligraphy, from Roman times up to the late Renaissance. Okay, so translation means moving without rotation. Okay, now he contrasts this model with another model of contrast that derives from another kind of pen. But instead of talking directly about this, I will show you some image from the late 18th and early 19th century. I will not spend too much time today on this, but I because I will talk about this in detail. Okay. Now, this is an example of typography by John Baskerville, an English typographer that worked in England toward the end of the 18th century. Okay, this is an example of 1775. You can see that the capitals are basically the same, the two-line system, everything that we saw. You can see also that contrast is enhanced here. We see more contrast in this letter than in the Roman traditional capitals. And if you carefully look at letters O, but you can see the same in C, B, etc., etc. If you remember, we have talked about an axis in letters like O in traditional epigraphic capitals. Okay, this axis here is completely vertical. Okay, so we can see this difference. Here you have a vertical axis instead of rotated axis. Other features, visual feature of this typeface is, for example, the shape of serifs that are different from traditional Roman serifs. Now, I will not talk about the minuscule and the italic, but I want to talk about another typographer, or rather a family of typographers that worked at the same time. The Didot. They were a family of typographers active in France during the late 18th century and early 19th century. They had a lasting and strong impact on the typography of 19th century. Again, you can see in letter O the shape, the fact that counter and the counter and the outer shape are aligned. So the axis is vertical. And if you look at serifs, you can see that they are made with a straight line. Okay? It's like an horizontal line at the base of letter. Another typographer that worked and made very similar typefaces is Giambattista Bodoni. He was Italian, although Italy, what we call today Italy, in terms of state, didn't exist until 1871. Okay, before Italy was divided in several autonomous states. Rome was, central Italy was under the Pope and the Church. southern Italy was under another king, and northern Italy was under Austrian control, etc., etc. It's not important, but when we talk about Italy, before the end of the 19th century, is a concept that is more a cultural concept than an actual thing. There was no Italian state until the end of the 19th century. By the way, Giambattista Bodoni worked in Rome and in Parma. At the time was under French control. Now, he made very similar typefaces very similar to the one made by the Didot. So let's see an example from Bodoni. We can see again in letters like O, okay, the vertical axis. You can see that serifs are horizontal straight lines. You can see a very strong contrast between thin lines that are really thin and thick lines. Okay? And if you look at bigger typefaces made for bigger dimension, bigger body size, you can see this contrast it is extreme. And look at the serifs, they are just a thin line, horizontal line at the base of letters. If we take a look at calligraphy at the end of 18th century, we can see something similar. The typical English calligraphy that we see here is made by this very marked contrast between thin and thick, okay? And the distribution of this contrast cannot be explained by the pen and the brush that we saw when we talked about capital Roman capital letters. So let's go again to North. Okay. A typical O, letter O, made in the style of Bodoni, why? Look like this. Sorry. Okay, so we have a vertical axis, let's call this Bodoni style. We have a vertical axis, we have a strong contrast, extreme contrast, because thin parts are actually thin. And if you look at the distribution of weights inside this letter, you can see that also, obviously, because of the vertical axis, you have a vertical stress in the main parts. And the other thing is serif. So let's see letters like H. Where serifs are thin, straight lines. Now, in this period, but also before this period, pens changed from this shape to the shape that you may be familiar with. Okay? This kind of pen that you can see, for example, in calligraphic pen or fountain pen, etc., has a fine point and a cut in the middle. And with this cut, if you apply more pressure to the pen, the 2 points diverge in this way. Okay? Okay, so if you write without applying too much pressure, you have a very thin line because the point is very, very thin. But if you write applying pressure, the 2 points of the pen, because of the cut, diverge and you have a bolder line. Okay? So now the contrast is not the effect of the direction, but it is the effect of pressure, okay? And the pressure means that the 2 points expands, okay? There is this expansion of the pen. Now, with this style, with this pen, a different taste emerged during the centuries, but in particular during the 18th century. So we start to see calligraphy where letters are made like this. How to use such pen? Now, for mechanical reasons, you can only apply pressure, not only but almost when you go down. okay? Because it is easier to apply pressure when you go toward you in this direction. If you prove to apply pressure and going in upward in this other direction here, okay, you obviously find that is very difficult because the thin point of the pen will find resistance from the paper and you make a mess, okay? So in order to apply more pressure, you have to go downward, okay? Now you have the reason why there is this strong contrast in downward strokes and vertical strokes. So a letter like O, I have to switch here. A letter like O is made in this way. You have your pen here. Now, you do not apply pressure, but once you go down, you start applying more pressure. So points expands, and then you release pressure, and then you do the same thing in the second half of the letter. So here we can sorry. I designed the pen like this, okay? So here you do not apply pressure because you are in horizontal direction, but when you go downward, you can apply pressure, and then you can create this elegant effect of lines that gradually go from seeing to seek to seen again, depending on the pressure and the ability of the writer. Now, Norzi calls this kind of contrast expansion. Because of the fact that the pen is made as this cut, so when you apply more pressure, you have this expansion of the two points of the pen. Okay, so we have two models of contrast for Norzi. So let's call these. I just want to rename. Why? Okay. Show keyboard. Okay. By the way, let's write this here. Nor. Okay. Using his terminology, we have two main kind of contrast: translation and expansion. Now we are talking what we are talking in these lessons is basically translation. Okay. Then when we will move toward recent times, we will talk about this expansion. But it is important to know about this terminology and about this theory because it has, as I said, a very strong impact on the way typography is taught today. And it is based on this idea that every typographic shape, at least in Latin typography, is based on these two models of contrast. And that you can explain basically everything with these two models of contrast. I think that it is more or less useful to explain our typography, but it is not that useful if you take this as an absolute guide. Because as we have seen, for example, by looking at the typeface, this is not a masterpiece, but it highlights a lot of the things that I wanted to talk about today. If we, when we talked about this typeface, Rustic by David Johnson Ross, we saw that there is a model-based contrast model, contrast pattern that derives from translation, what Nordsey calls translation, the broad pen, and the way in which the writing angle is changes between the traditional epigraphic capitals and the book capitals. So there is this idea, but we cannot explain everything here by just taking into consideration the contrast, translational contrast. We saw that in these letters, we have a lot of reusing shapes. So they are modular in some way. They are made composing shapes together. There is a different operation than just copying the trace of the pen. We saw, at least I think there is here, an attention to the relation between empty parts and filled parts, between positive and negative. So that's why I introduced the idea of ambivalent pictures, like the face, vase, is illusion that I showed you before, where no, sorry, okay, where there is this ambivalent link between positive and negative, black and white, foreground and background. And we can see in some way this at work here in the capitals by David John Ross and his interpretation of the book capitals, the rustic capitals. Okay, so from this this model, the Nordsey model, we have the idea of mimicking the pen with in the way I explained last Friday, by using this hatching technique. Okay, you can mimic the trace of a pen that moves without I think that this is useful indeed, because in this way you can actually study how the contrast should be distributed, etc., etc. But if you want to study different letters, for example, pixel letters are made with parts like pixel on screen. Clearly, the idea of contrast made by translation and all these things are not that useful in the context of pixel. But at the same time, again, this is useful when you have to understand certain shapes of serif typefaces that are at the base of our Latin typography and are very used today. But the process of drawing do not stop here. I mean, when you have the general shapes given by the pen or given by this mimicking of the pen, you have the distribution of weights and contrast in the letters. But you have to decide and design details, because the details are what gives to letters their flavor. Okay, so let's say you have this letter. Okay, you have sketched something like this. Now, when you design these, you still have to decide vertical strokes are actually straight or are flared like this. Okay, this is a decision. Then you have to decide how serifs are connected to the letters. So you have your stem. Serifs can be the continuation of your letter or your stem, I mean, okay? Or you can draw them as wedge, like this. You can decide for a very sharp ending, you can decide for example, it can be, sorry, it can be made like this. With a smooth connection here and a sharp connection here. You have a lot of possibilities. The choices you make, other choices can be constrained by the choices you made. Other parts, for example, you decide that your serifs are organically attached to your stems, so even the top serif should be the same. So your letter can be made like this. If, oh, oops, if this is, this should be your, oops, upper serif. You can observe the distribution of contrast and decide how the shape will be made. Okay. Now, the main parts here are the places where there is a connection between lines. It is in these places when you have connections, when you have where you can play with shapes to give to letters their personality. Okay, so instead of these, you can have this, where this connection here is not angular. So you can also have something like this. I honestly do not like, I prefer angular junction. By the way, this is the task of design. Once you have your general distribution, you have to decide how the connection where different parts clashes, how to resolve this clash between different parts of your letters. And that's it. You can use the model of mimicking the letters, so studying how the contrast uh, how the contrast is visible in your letters, whether you can see if your writing angle is steep or small, and in this way you can decide for different styles. But then you have to move on and study how details, connections, junction between parts are actually made, because that's where the personality, the expression quality of expressive quality of typefaces are. Now, the other thing is the positive negative dialectics, okay? The relation between positive and negative. Again, if I have my simple model made I can focus on the counter. And decides what shape the counter has. This is done by drawing the counter instead of the black part. So let's say that this is, for me, this is a nice shape. So I can work on this shape and then decide how the rest of the letter should follow. Okay, this is like working in reverse. So reversing the logic of vision and the logic of writing, that is tracing the black part. You can reverse this by focusing on the white part and drawing the white part before the black part. Okay, just 10-minute break. And then I will close the lesson. Okay. Give me 15 minutes.